co-host will kind of watch the door that will do it. So welcome to Wordweavers. This is interesting times, but here we are. So thank you for coming. And yeah, I want to just briefly, because we are from places that we don't know each other. So we got a little bit acquainted here. Say what state, because we have some other states here. I think that's pretty cool. Something about yourself related to Marion or related to Wordweavers, but brief, not a whole story there. So everybody unmute, but listen. Okay, Sarah Lord, briefly tell us about yourself to the people who don't know you.
Oh, I met Marion when I was teaching in Antioch, and she taught me how to be a storyteller. The end.
And where are you now, Sarah? Where do you live?
Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Wow.
Awesome.
She flew the coop.
Yeah.
But here, she's back. Who knew?
Bad punny.
Jean Ellison.
Jean Ellison is from Berkeley, California, a longtime Californian. And we go back, Marion and I, with the Storytelling Association of California and the Bay Area Storytelling Festival.
Yep, very cool. Mr. Lewis.
My name is Ed Lewis. I'm part of the Sacramento Storytellers Guild. I live in Davis, and Marion and I met when I taught early childhood education at Los Medanos College in Pittsburgh, and her and I started our first celebrations there.
11 years.
11 years of celebration.
So Ed moved away. My people move away. So there's another co-host who moved away.
Where is he?
Now he's back.
I live in Davis, and I'm part of the Sacramento Storytellers.
Davis.
We'll be meeting next Saturday if any of you want to join in.
Yeah, how about at the end, remind me to make announcements. Okay, we got to go faster. Angela, you're on just briefly.
Oh, yeah. I'm from Sacramento with the Sacramento Guild. And I don't know, I met Marion somewhere in my travels. But
Davis.
My travels, yeah, to Davis. And so I'm just really happy to be here.
Thank you. Linda Walls. Unmute yourself.
Hi, Linda Walls. I know Marion through Bay Area Storytelling Festival and SAC. I'm a first generation Californian. I found out that that's not a big deal in comparison when I'm having a conversation with Marion, who is not only a first generation Californian, but who wants to hold up the number of fingers if they know how many Marion could hold up if I were, oh, Marion gave herself away. There you go. Well, are you 4, Jean?
Mm.
Wow.
Great grandpa.
There we are. Wow.
Okay, everybody hold up. How many generations are you in California?
I'm the first.
Me too.
But
We're glad you are.
almost. You'll hear about that too.
Okay, Martha, unmute yourself. Yeah, it doesn't have to be strictly about Marion, but storytelling.
Storytelling? Oh, goodness.
Whatever you want to say to introduce yourself to the other people who do not know you.
Okay, I'm Martha McCorkle, and I belong to the Sacramento Storytellers Guild. And I met Marion at Byron School when my kids were growing up. She was teaching there. Now this is my littlest big kid, and she's 43.
Yep. We were at elementary school, huh? Yep.
Yeah, I'm turning 44 on the 10th of October.
Really?
Time passes.
We're in Iowa City, Iowa. It snows in the winter, and sometimes we snow out of school. Never got the chance to get snow out of school.
You did not get.
Whole school has changed out there on the highway. Yep.
No, I moved first.
Okay. My mom was my introduction to storytelling, though. I listen to her practicing stories. That she'd sit on the bed and practice stories she was going to tell at her library the next day.
Martha.
Next.
And it's my dad, John.
Don't know. Oh, here's some here.
Yeah. Hey, John. That's right. I know John too. He was on the school board.
I fancy myself a pro-teacher minority among the school board members. And I'm actually third generation Californian.
All right. Excellent. Okay. Got to move along. Sarah Armstrong.
Storytelling Association of California and Bay Area Storytelling Festival. And I've got to play with Marion at some of her and Ed's celebrations.
Yeah. Thank you. Nancy Rosanes.
I'm just a visitor from Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I enjoy all your stories. And thank you for allowing me to attend.
Oh, super.
Anytime. Thank you for coming. Diane's phone. Diane, what's your last name?
Hi, I'm
And-
Strategus, Diane Strategus.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I'm from Sacramento. I first became acquainted with storytelling through a meetup group, which was sponsored by the Sacramento Storytelling Guild. And I've also been to Woodland to listen to stories at a cafe there.
Excellent.
So I'm a listener. I'm not a
Davis has
storyteller.
had, David. We need listeners. There's no story without a listener. Thanks for coming, Diane.
You're welcome.
Okay, Eileen and John.
Hi,
Hi.
where's the,
Oh, wait, we'll get it back over to Marion from ones. I'm getting used to all these things. There you are.
okay.
Hi, Marion.
Hello.
Yeah, good. Again, how are you doing?
Good. So briefly tell yourself to the people who don't know you. Briefly.
Okay, my name's John Copping. Eileen and I have been in Antioch for about 5 years. I guess I've been part of Wordweavers for 3 or 4. And let's see, I've been in California since I was almost 10, but originally from Staten Island, New York. So see that there's a movie coming out called The King of Staten Island. Sounded kind of neat to me to hear that because I'm proud of my heritage. Anyway, so.
Great.
We call it his point of origin because he's lived all over the states.
Yeah, other states too. But anyway, go ahead.
I'm Eileen Sujata. I'm born and raised Californian. 3 out of the 4 kids in my family are. The rest, and my sister is from Michigan and my parents from Denver. So one of the very few people these days that are born and raised Californian. So
yeah.
You said, John, we've been here 5 years and I'm a solid listening participant.
We need listeners. Thank you.
Last week or last month, I think.
But I enjoy
it. Shag's turn.
Stephen Shagrin, better known as Shags, college nickname that stuck like glue. Originally from Youngstown, Ohio, now living in Walnut Creek, California. My involvement with the storytelling organization began in 2006 when I moved out here, and Craig Harrison, who I knew in Toastmasters, was serving on the board, mentioned that their treasurer was stepping down, asked me if I'd had any experience with organizations, and I said, sure have. So I've been treasurer since 2006.
Hooray!
Involved with that. This is actually the first time I'm telling. I've always been a listener, but I've been a Toastmaster, so presentations are nothing new to me. I just thought I would share something interesting in a sort of an impromptu story. I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, it's half an hour of this.
Thank you. We're making history. Okay, Mr. Paul, just on your microphone, tell us about yourself. Let's see, Paul. Yeah, your microphone's on, Paul. So can you tell us about yourself?
There.
Hi, Paul. Where do you live? I'm going to go to Ida Johnson, and maybe we can get Paul in a minute. Ida Johnson, how are you?
She's the last one. There she is.
Let's see, I'm looking.
Nothing.
Thelma? Okay, Ida, your microphone is on. Ida Johnson, are you there? Maybe she stepped away. Okay, last try. Paul, tell us about yourself. Where are you from? Okay, moving on, because sometimes people step away, and that's when you do step away, yeah, do like they did. You cut off the video while you go take care of something and come back. We are going to start. This is historical stories, and this, I do like historical stories, but for me personally, you'll find out I got motivated for this particular session, timed for this month, so I can again refer to a story I'm working on that's local history. You'll find out more about it. And some of you have heard it before from me because it's been oral until now. I'm challenged to submit it to a book. Anyway, I've opened it up to historical stories from anywhere, and a lot of you responded, which I appreciate. So we're going to start with Mr. Ed Lewis. And Ed is talking about Nellie Bly Baker, not to be confused with the journalist Nellie Bly. Her years were, Nellie, the journalist was 1864 to 1922, but Nellie Bly Baker was born in 1893 in Oklahoma, and she died in 1984 in Lone Pine, California. So she was an actress in the silent film era and the early talkies. Ed's story.
And her name is Nellie Bly
Yeah, we need
Now-
you a little bit louder, Ed.
Can't hear him.
How about this? Can you hear me now?
Oh, much better.
Okay.
Sure.
All right. I don't know how many of you have had the opportunity to watch the amazing travel TV show, California Gold, with Huell Hauser. Well, I have watched many of his shows. He takes you to the most interesting places in California, meeting the most interesting people. And one of the shows I saw was about Nellie Bly O'Brien, and I knew I was going to go down that she is famous for. So I'm going to start this presentation. I will be talking, but you won't hear me in a minute, so nothing's wrong with your computers. This is the beginning of the presentation.
Yeah.
Nellie Bly O'Brien was a silent film star in the 1920s and 30s. She was the secretary for Charlie Chaplin in 1929. He recognized her talents immediately and gave her small parts in some of his silent films. She took it a step further, though, and she became the first female film projectionist in a male-dominated industry. Now, Charlie Chaplin really recognized more of her talents, and she started having some starring roles. She was in the silent film A Woman in Paris and The Kid. And her big breakthrough was when she came up to Mammoth Lake in the Eastern Sierras off of Highway 395 to star with Randolph Scott's film, A Thundering Herd. Now, she fell in love with that place, and she decided that she was going to give up the acting career. So she convinced her husband to buy the Lundy Resort up in the mountains above Mono Lake and Lee Vining off of Highway 395. It was a dilapidated, rundown resort that hadn't been used for a lot of years. So, single-handedly, she tore down the old lumber, salvaged it, and built her herself and her husband a cabin. From there, she hired some local people, and they built 4 cabins, a restaurant, and a store, and started their resort in 1952. She was famous as a marksman, or shall we say markswoman, and as a hunting and fishing guide. And she became the first female licensed female hunting and fishing in California. She was also famous as a storyteller around campfires on the excursions she would take up into the mountains. In the late 60s, they sold the resort and moved down into the Mono Lake area in Lee Vining. There she again built a house, and in her spare time, she decided to build an upside down house, roof on the ground, and the floor in the air. Of course, on the ceiling, or the floor, she had tacked down a stove, a bed, a nightstand, a lamp, a lantern, a mouse, a cat, and of course, the upside down chamber pot. She lived there until she passed away at the age of 91. And fortunately, for all of us, the Lee Vining Museum moved the upside down house and put it 1 block off of Highway 395 in their museum, in front of their museum. And you can go there now and see this amazing treasure from one of California's most respected and beloved women, Nellie Bly O'Brien. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. That was fun. Did you say she died? What did you say about 1991?
So she died at the age of 91.
Oh, okay. That was it. All right. So I was still right. She died in
1984 is when she passed.
So that was right. 91 years. Okay. All right. Anybody else see that house up there? So, yeah. Oh, see, Sarah Lord saw it.
Oh, nice.
What an amazing place that must be. So when you go, do you just like go and peek in the windows to see it upside down?
It's basically an open door. You walk up the porch steps, and the door is open, and you just look in. It's a cabinet. It's not huge. You know, it's maybe 12 by 12. It's a very nice, very beautiful.
I think in a long time ago, I think I saw it. Who knows? Was I with you, Sarah? Oh, we have to unmute Sarah. Can you unmute yourself, Sarah? Unmute audio. Okay, we're spending too much time with this microphone.
No, Marion,
There she is. Okay.
Marion, you and I went camping over in that area. We went to Mammoth Lakes, and we went to that house together.
That's what I forget things. Thank you, Sarah. All right. So, and California history, I love it, partly because I'm 3rd generation. So it's fascinating. So just wander up in the hills, and like Sarah and I did, you'll discover things like that. Amazing.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Is that, what was the thing? Tago Pass Resort, is that what he was talking about?
It was called the Lundy Resort, Lundy. It's not in operation anymore. But
Okay.
that's what it was called.
Okay. Thanks. Also, just
Okay,
for
our
your
next
information-
storyteller is Angela James. Okay, we're going to work on unmuting her.
Yeah, I'm
You're still
unmuted.
muted. Oh, I thought I heard you. There.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay.
There you go. So Angela is a storyteller, she told you, and she's a poet. She's steeped in the oral tradition like was practiced by her Caribbean family. She's a teaching artist with the Sacramento Metropolitan Arts Commission. She's a member of 2 Sacramento storytelling groups, a member of a performing troupe, Phoenix Drum and Dance Company. She's a drummer and a dancer. She is active. She does poetry and promotes such in the schools. She's a very busy artist, as you can tell, and she's here today to share Mother's Cup. Angela?
Oh, thank you, Marion. You know, when you told me about historical tales, the first thing that popped into my mind was, oh my goodness, in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. And I'm like, oh, historical tales, a recitation of dates and just autobiographical descriptions of people long dead and you don't even know. But then I remember there's also another definition for history, and history is a story. So I hope to capture the chronological, the timing, and the story in talking about my mother's cup. But once upon a time, and I use the timing really loosely because I don't remember the exact month, but I knew it was in 1983, and it was the middle of the week. And I was driving along Highway 1 in Florida, past Miami on the way to Key Largo. That day, I stopped at the flea market. It must have been 10 in the morning. Wasn't much of a flea market. We've seen those, about a dozen ramshackle stands set in a rough semicircle, a little bit back from the highway. I walked around the area in like less than 5 minutes because, you know, the merchandise displayed looked like it was one step away from the local dump. Yeah, but as I went past the last vendor, a voice called out to me. And this was a little bit different because it was a van with an awning. And the voice called out, hey, how are you doing, daughter? I sort of looked around, you know, was he talking to me? But since I was the only person, 10 o'clock in the morning in this flea market that was a customer, it had to be me. So I obligingly went over and looked over the merchandise on the little card table. A box of books, some photo frames with a glass missing, some rusty tools that had seen better days, assortment of chip dishes, some records, and in the middle of it all, an ugly white china jug. So I asked the guy, how much you want for that jug? He said, you want that thing? I've been trying to get rid of it for a long time. You can have it, no charge. I could see why he couldn't get rid of it. It was the ugliest thing I had ever seen. It was so ugly, it almost looked beautiful. It was about a foot tall, dirty, grayish white, years of dirt and grime all over, clinging to its rounded sides, and a dark crack all the way from the lip to the bottom. How much? I persisted. He says, come in out of the sun and take a seat. He invited me into the shade of the awning. He says, and I will tell you the story of that cup. So he settled himself on an upturned bucket, picked up the cup, cradled it in his arms, and told me, that cup belonged to my great-grandmother. She was a slave brought all the way from Africa. He must have seen the skepticism in my face because he continued, I am 83 years old. My grandmother came here on the last slave ship from Africa. That sounded interesting. So he cradled the cup in his arms, running his hands over the dirty crack, and he started telling me this story. The story was that his great-grandmother was a slave brought to Alabama. Was it Alabama? Yes, from Ghana in 1860. For those of us history buffs, we know that the slave trade was abolished in 1808, but it was such a lucrative business that slavers took the risk of making trips anyway. So this one is the last actually documented one. She was a young woman when she was captured in Ghana and she was sold to this slaver. And the name of the ship was the Clotilda, according to him. So his great-great-grandmother, he said, she was young and strong, and when she got to Alabama, they put her to work on the plantation. Well, she worked on there for a while, but by and by she got promoted to work in the house. You know, even though she didn't speak English, she had only been there a short time, but she was a real looker, really good looking. He interjected right there that he was sure that I didn't, that I totally knew what that meant. Well, she's working in the house, and one day she's stirring up some lemonade in that cup and hit it just right with a spoon, and the crack started all the way from the top to the bottom, and the lemonade started to seep out. Well, the mistress of the house was so upset, she banished his great-grandmother back to the fields. That woman, the great-grandmother, she snuck back to the house at night and picked that cup out of the garbage and took it to her little cabin. The next day, she went out and got sap from a tree, and she tried to fix that crack. And actually, whatever she did, it worked. It worked perfectly. That cup, that ugly cup that I was looking at, was her pride and joy. She hid it under her bunk because she couldn't let the other slaves see it, because nobody had anything like this, especially from the big house. Well, occasionally she would take it out when nobody was around and rub her hands around the sides and put it back under the bunk. Well, that's how the story of the cup started. Well, his grandmother, that was his great-grandmother. His grandmother was born in 1862. In 1862, during the Civil War. And there was no doubt as to who the daddy of his grandmother was. He laughed when he told me about this. He says, you know, I'm what they call a throwback. That's because I have green eyes, yeah? A real throwback. So at the end of the Civil War, after the Civil War, when some of the freed slaves pulled their money together and they bought land from the ex-master right outside of Mobile, Alabama, yeah, and started their own town called Africa Town. They built schools, they built churches, they had their own businesses, and it was a really thriving town. My great-grandmother, his great-grandmother, when she moved there, she took her very few possessions, including that mug, to her home as a free woman. Well, by that time, she had been married or jumped the broom and had 2 more children. His mother, that first child who was born into slavery in 1962, she got married. And as a wedding present, her mother gave her that cup. Well, his mother only had boys. So he had 3 brothers, So his mom kept the cup for a long, long time. And when he got married in 1923, after World War I, they all enlisted for the service, his mother gave his bride the cup as a wedding present. Well, his wife didn't really want it. She was a modern woman and she didn't want any old things. She just wanted new things. But she was very respectful and kept it and took it with them when they moved away from Alabama out here to California to find a better situation in life. Well, things didn't work out between them at all. His wife left him. And when she left, she took everything except that cup. She left it sitting on the kitchen floor in the middle of the floor. Well, that didn't stop him from moving on. He got married a second time and had to convince his second wife to keep the cup. She didn't want any leavings from his first wife. But when he explained that it was a family heirloom, she kind of relented, and she would listen to the stories that he would tell about the cup and the stories he had heard from his mother and his grandmother. And, she really embraced it. She put that cup on the mantelpiece, and when visitors came, she would be showing them and relating those stories that he had told them. Well, that he had told her. Well, his second wife was, they didn't have any children. He didn't have any children with the first wife. He didn't have any children with the second wife. So she was mother to all the children in the neighborhood. They spent a good 20 years together, and then the cancer took her. So he left California and goes back to Alabama, but it was different. It was totally different. This was in the 50s. The town had receded to almost nothing. All the people he knew, they had gone. His brothers had moved up north to their family. None of their wives wanted them on. And they weren't interested in family history. So at that point, he moved to Florida. That's where I met him. Put down roots in Miami and figured the third time was a charm. He got married for the third time. Still didn't have any children, but his wife loves that cup. She called it Mother's Cup. She couldn't get enough of the stories that he had heard from his mother and his grandmother about life in Africa, a place he'd never seen. He told the heart-wrenching stories that had been handed down through the generations about his great-grandmother's really terrible trip from Africa, 2 months in the ocean, just in the most horrible of conditions. She just loved it. She loved it. She loved the story. She loved the stories better, the ones that talked about the life in Africa. But anyway, his wife had died 3 years prior. And
You inadvertently got muted.
yeah, he felt himself coming to the end of the road and had been trying to get down to only the things he needed. He told me, he said, I don't need this cup anymore, so take it. Consider it a gift from my great-grandmother, all the way from Africa. I took that jug from him. And as he escorted me to my car, the unexpected happened. I stumbled on the uneven path, and that heavy cup flew from my arms and hit the gravel with a resounding thud. It must have hit just at the right time because it shattered into what seemed like 1,000,000 fragments. I was mortified, My cheeks stood red from embarrassment, shame, distress. Tears started to roll down my face. But the old man, he stood next to me and put his arm around me. And he said, "Don't be upset. It's okay. You now have the story. And now you have the story. You have all the timelines and you have the tale of my mother's cup."
Thank you. Yes, despite life, that's our stories. We're creating stories here, and she made a story out of a broken cup. Fabulous. Because, yeah, life can be broken, and there's a story there, no matter what's going on. Thank you so much, Angela. Our next teller is Shags.
You're welcome.
Oh, thank you so much. Shags is going to tell next, and he's also going to screen share while he does it. So take it away. Let's see, Shags. I was just going to say, yeah, it's about his paternal grandfather who was America's youngest theater manager. Shags.
Thank you, Marion. And I just want to note, please click on participants so you can see if anybody's going to be joining while I'm talking. We still have people coming in every minute. It's great. Welcome, everybody. Stephen Chagrin, and you're going to hear a story about my paternal grandfather, who was an old man. Now, everybody's grandfather is an old man, but my grandfather was an old man. You see, he was born in 1885. He didn't get married until his 40s. He was a confirmed bachelor. He and his brother, he had an identical twin brother, and the two of them were really the talk of the town in Youngstown, Ohio, because they were involved in very interesting activities. See, my grandfather, well, as a young boy, he was bored, as most boys were. So he went to the theater. Now, this isn't movies. Remember, this is 1885. Movies didn't really get started until around until 1912, 1916, and those were the silent films, as we heard about before from Ed. Now, Gramps went to live theater, and he loved it. He loved it so much that he got a job as an usher, and then as a ticket seller, and then as a box office manager, and then he became a theater manager, a manager of live theater, 16 years old. Now, I heard this story, but my grandfather, he passed away in 1974 when I was just 17 years old. I knew some of the history. I heard all these names. Every now and then I could see the movies, because back then, with only 3 channels plus 4, if you had public TV or an independent TV channel, you could see old movies on TV if you knew when they were on, if you were awake, and if you had TV Guide to find out exactly where they were. Now it's easy with YouTube and Netflix and Xfinity and all the histories of the movies that have been reproduced and put on. You can see them. So the names that I heard growing up meant nothing to me until after he passed and after my grandmother passed. And we found this box of articles that she had collected, which were amazing. Now, this is the first article that appeared, The Youngest Manager. Notice the spelling of the last name, S-C-H-A-G-R-I-N. He later dropped the C. Some of the family did, some didn't. Wherever we find Chagrins, S-H, S-C-H, or even C-H, we know we're related. This was talking about his starting when he was just a mere child. As it says, he advanced to the position of local manager, which position he's held for several years. He's known all over the circuit as the youngest theater manager in the country. Here he is, guarding the take of the day. Now, as I said, Grandpa and Uncle Max, great Uncle Max, were twin brothers. Now, I share the gap that Max had. My grandfather didn't. That's the only way you could tell these gentlemen apart. As you can see, identical twins. The other thing was that Max smiled a little bit more, as opposed to my grandfather, who didn't. Now, Max was the Pacific Coast manager of the Warner Brothers Theater. That's what it says in this article. That's another interesting story, and we'll get to a little bit of it later on, because he did go out west. You see, the Warner Brothers were from Youngstown, Ohio. One of the first jobs Jack Warner got in showbiz was performing at the Youngstown Opera House, which my grandfather and Uncle Max managed at that time. Now, before they got to the Opera House, however, there was a place called the Park Theater. This was a grand theater, one of the most magnificent show places in the country, according to this article that we found in my grandmother's collection. This is where the Park Theater was partially owned by George M. Cohan and a group of other actors and performers who traveled the country. The reason they bought theaters and owned them all around the country is so they would have a place to play when their shows went around the country. They started in Broadway, but you couldn't get everybody to Broadway. It was train only then. They actually traveled the country in the circuit. They showed up at my grandfather's theater. Here it mentions that most of the shows at the time went for $2 for the best seats. Al Jolson, a lifelong friend of my grandfather. Again, I hear the name, heard the music, didn't mean anything until later. They got $4 when Jolie came into town. They brought in the show Bombo. That was a big success on Broadway. Fantastic show. When they opened it, at the end, there was a 28-minute ovation. My grandfather was one of the first managers to ever have the chutzpah to come out and tell him, hey, people have got to go home tonight, Al. Shut it down. Thought it was a great story when I heard it. Now, this is a rendering of the park. I haven't been able to find a photograph of the original frontage as the park. I did see one as a hotel, and it looks just as magnificent. This is the inside. Can you imagine being 16, 17, 18, 20 years old, and you're in charge of a facility this magnificent? This is where many of the players of the day performed. The grand entryway, all the way down. Businesses on the sides, of course, but the grand hallway into this majestic theater. As I mentioned, one of the early investors in this was George M. Cohan. Here he is about the age that he was when they brought out Little Johnny Jones on Broadway. That's the one that featured the song, I'm a Yankee Doodle Dandy. If you may recall that from, what was the movie with Jimmy Cagney? It was Yankee Doodle Dandy. So there you go. Later on, here's a picture my grandfather had taken with him and George. They're backstage in 1935 at the Grand Opera House in New York City when George M. is appearing in one of the 3 comedies that Eugene O'Neill wrote, Wilderness. It's a great photograph. I've since had colorized, but it's so much better in black and white. You can just see the love and admiration in George's eyes toward my grandfather. He's about 7 years older, but they had a tremendous lifelong friendship. And I wish I had known more about all of this when I was 16, 17 years old. I really would have spent time with him, but it didn't get into my mind until after I was done in college and law school, and I got all these articles and photographs. Now, as I mentioned, he moved on to the Grand Opera House. I have a friend in Youngstown whose sister passed away. This woman's sister saved every scrap of paper that she got, every ticket, every program. This is one that I found from her. What a lovely gift. My grandfather as the manager at the theater in 1912. Now, this was another magnificent place. Look at this building. No longer existing, of course, on that corner in Youngstown, Ohio. There's a bank there now. This is the inside. Again, 25 years old, a manager. Now, he went to Hollywood a lot. This is a picture of my father and my grandfather. You could see, looks like it's his grandfather. They're backstage at the Warner lot with Jane Wyman. You might remember Jane. She was Ronald Reagan's first wife. Now, this is my dad's first trip to California. Love the pompadour. By the time I met him 7 years later, he had very little hair. And look at that suit he's wearing. They had such a great time in Hollywood. They took the train. As I mentioned, they took the train everywhere. I'm not sure if commercial aircraft was around then, But I know that even when it was, my grandfather never flew. Not until he was about 88 years old, 87 years old, and his health required him to get home quickly, and they couldn't arrange for the train. Otherwise, he took the train everywhere. He just didn't believe those things would stay up in the air. They also ran into somebody else that day, my dad's favorite star, Jimmy Cagney. Now, this was taken in 1952. So this was about 7 years after they made the film Yankee Doodle Dandy. Here's a photograph of my grandfather and his twin brother. Max is on the right, and Joe, my grandfather's on the left. Now look at the difference in the complexion. Look at the difference in the smile. Look at the difference in the aging. Here's a man on the right who is single, living in California, having been there since 1932. The one on the left lived in Youngstown, Ohio, married with 2 children. Such pallor. I never really saw him smile much. When I saw this picture of Uncle Max, I said, no matter what happens in my life, I want to die in California, or at least live there for a while. That's one of the things that brought me here. Who recognizes that fellow in the middle? Anybody? Nobody? That is Al Jolson's brother, Harry. Al had an older brother, Harry Jolson, who was a performer as well. Not as nearly an accomplished singer. No way at all. But a comedic actor and a comedian, a stage actor. This was taken in July of 1951. Al had passed away in October of 1950, about 2 weeks after he got back from his last tour in Korea. This was the first opportunity my grandfather had to go out to California to pay a condolence call. I had this colorized by somebody who's been doing a lot of Jolson colorizations. Does a magnificent job, and it really does the complexions well. Again, you can see why I want to be in California. So let's continue on a little bit with Uncle Max. A very nice man. You can almost see the gap in his teeth. I only met him twice in my life. The first time I was about 6 years old. I saw him and I said, "Grandpa, Papa." And I ran to give him a hug, and then my grandfather came around the corner and said, "Ha ha ha, that's Uncle Max." I had never met a identical twin in the family like that before. This is a photo where that came from in the newspaper. It's hard to tell which is which. 1939. Now, Max, as I mentioned, went to Hollywood to be the West Coast operator of the Warner division. The Warner Brothers moved from Youngstown, around the 20s or so. They were operating the Duquesne Film Distribution Center out of Pittsburgh, and they also had a theater. This is the Cascade Theater behind me. This was the very first movie house owned and operated by the Warner boys. It was in Newcastle, Pennsylvania. Still exists. It's now a museum, the Warner History Museum. In fact, an interesting story about that, a quick aside, is they had only the money to open the theater. They didn't have the money for chairs. One day they were getting a new run, a movie was coming in, and the first day it's released is when everybody wants to see it. But one of the people in the town had died, a man of great notoriety. They made arrangements with the family. They said, "Look, we know you're having the funeral the same day we're getting the film in. If you delay the funeral a day, we'll give your family tickets to the movies for the rest of their lives." They had the opening with all the seats from the funeral home. Interesting side bit. Now, Max got around Hollywood quite a bit. He, after being the manager up and down the coast for overseeing all the Met theaters in the studio system, the Warner Theater in Los Angeles, there was one near Long Beach. I can't remember them all, but he was there for the opening and oversaw the managers, and they got tired of that. Remember, there was no I-5, there was no 101. It was a trudge getting around the state. He decided to stay south. At first, he was a talent scout because he had a really good eye for talent. Of course, with all the people going through the country on these traveling shows and working with my grandfather in Youngstown, they knew where to find people that could be good in front of a camera. Then he struck out and became one of Hollywood's first agents for actors and for writers. I wish I could have spent so much more time with Max and learning his story. That's another history for another day. Here he is with Joe E. Brown. a character actor who was known for having one of the largest mouths in Hollywood. Here he is with Joe Mark, his first cousin. Joe Mark was the very first casting director for Warner Studios. Here he is with one of his young talents. Does anybody recognize this child star? She was MGM's answer to Shirley Temple. She was the antithesis of Shirley Temple. She played the little bad girl. Nobody recognizes her. She got a little bit older. I'll show you another picture. She got a little bit older. And you can see I'm stalling because I'm going blank on her name now too, but it'll come to me. And you can see Max and I look so much alike. And what a great photo of her. And here she is when she's a little bit older. Now that's my grandfather and my grandmother with her in Hollywood. She's in her 20s here.
Shags, you're frozen for a minute here.
Yep. I know, I'm getting internet connections unstable. That's what happens sometimes on my end. And I hope I'm back. This is my grandfather, my grandmother, and this is the young actress. She was Josephine the plumber. Anybody remember her name? As I said, I'm just going blank on it right now too. But, oh, wait, I know where to find it.
Come back in. We know Shags is going to come back
Yeah,
in.
I'm back. I'm back. Sorry about that. You got me? I'm back.
Yeah, we're back. Okay, so
Sorry about that. Yeah, sometimes
Was that Withers?
goes down. I just can't help that. But at least the recording's still going. So Jane Withers. Yes, Jane Withers, who was Josephine the plumber in the Comet commercials, if you may remember. Now, Grandpa got out of not the entertainment business, but movies came out. So he started managing movie houses. One of them was the Park downtown. They started showing movies in 1916, along with live theater. But then he moved into just cinema only. And he worked as a manager for a number of different places until he decided to open his own theater, a neighborhood theater. I'm getting connections unstable again.
Yeah. You're back on.
Okay. And so in 1938, he built a theater on the south side of Youngstown, one of the neighborhood theaters in a beautiful Art Deco style called the Foster Theater. It had its opening with Hold That Coed. Celebrities sent telegrams and flowers. Jack and Harry Warner, former Youngstown men. Samuel Goldwyn, Darryl Zanuck, Al Jolson, Jane Withers, Jackie Cooper, Deanna Durbin. Names from the past: W.C. Fields, Edgar Bergen, Charlie McCarthy, Betty Davis, Errol Flynn, Rosemary and Priscilla Lane, Olivia de Havilland, and many others. The mayor was there to officiate the opening of the theater. It was such a beautiful theater. It had a flower shop on one side and a candy shop on the other in the front, although when I had this painting commissioned, I didn't know what side they were on, so I inadvertently got it reversed. This was actually a handmade drawing, pencil drawing I had done for my father's 50th or 60th birthday. My father had to manage the theater when he grew up as an assistant manager because it was the family thing, but he absolutely hated it. And unfortunately, it didn't stay in the family forever. My grandfather just got a little too old to handle it. Now, I knew every inch of that theater. I could operate projectors that were from 1938, those arc rod projectors, and hit the thing when the lights came up in the corner of the film, and you could synchronize the projectors. I knew how to splice film. It was a union job, but they taught me how to do it anyway. I loved the projectionists there. That was such a magnificent place to grow up. Every Saturday I was there for cartoons and Little Rascals and Three Stooges film festivals. When I got older, it was midnight movies. It became an art theater. But they had midnight movies and underground movies. My friends and I could get in for free because the manager then was the projectionist when I was growing up, who was a dear friend until the day he died. Not only that, we got the balcony to ourselves, which was closed out from the public, because by that time, it had gone from a normal theater to an X-rated. In fact, it is one of only a handful of X-rated movie houses that continue to operate in the country today. Don't know why. As I mentioned, he passed away when I was 17. Front page news. I couldn't believe it. The newspaper came and I looked, there's Pup on the front page. As I'm reading this, it came to me, my, what a great guy to have really picked his brain about. Again, I'm starting at 17 now. Fortunately, I had an opportunity to go back and dig through these and talk with his sisters. My grandparents all lived into their 80s and 90s. I even had one great-grandmother live into her hundreds. So I was fortunate to get a lot of the family story. One place I continue to get stories is from the books that came from Joe and Max's library. One of this is OK for Sound. This would be of interest to you, Ed, because this goes back and looks at the whole history of silent movies and how it came about. The reason we have this is it was endorsed and signed, inscribed to Max, to my dear friend from Youngstown, Ohio, and new out here. May the next 20 years be a little bit easier, I hope. Warner did not have an easy time becoming successful, but now they're one of the one that still exists. Jack wrote his autobiography in the 60s, My First 100 Years in Hollywood, and he inscribed a copy and gave it to Max, from one Youngstown boy to another. In fact, they even mention a month or so after I made my debut at the Dome, Max and Joe Chagrin asked me to come to their Youngstown Opera House on Diamond Square on Sunday nights, where they gave concerts when the Dome was closed. So the connection with my family and Warner was way back. It actually came full circle. Harry's granddaughter, Cass, has Warner Sisters Productions. Cass and I have met in person when she came out to the Harry Warner Film Festival in Slippery Rock, Pennsylvania, when I was still living in Ohio. And when Uncle Max died, my grandfather received a condolence letter signed by Jack. So it was really nice to have a little bit of that history going in the family. That's where things end for the youngest theater manager in the country, Joe Chagrin. Proud to say, my grandfather.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Thank you. Let me stop share and unspotlight. I may not be spotlighted now, but that's because I got lost. But thank you very much. Unstable.
Really, to tell us something.
Unstable connection again, so I'll see what I can do.
Yeah. Oh, okay. John does. Okay. Unmute John. I've unmuted you, John, but maybe you have to do it yourself. There. Okay.
Okay. All
Go,
right.
John.
That was a fascinating bit of history. Thank you. Hopefully I can do it quickly because I know we probably don't have a lot of time left, but
Figure out how to do it.
He's here. Shags, there was a question. Can you
Here
unmute?
we are.
There.
Okay, what was your question? Chat. Okay, what do you want to say, John? Hold on, I'm figuring out how to see it. Okay. Okay, so we want to chat. We want to.
No, Shags is here.
You're live now. I keep getting dropped.
Never mind. I don't know how to do it. Oh, text. Okay. Okay, Shags. S-H-A.
No. Just have John ask the question already.
Just talk. It's okay.
Can you?
Eileen, just have John ask the question because we can hear John.
Send to Shags.
I'm going to mute her and we can move on.
She's going to type.
Send.
Okay, you know what, Shags? You can answer in the chat. Okay? Okay, so people can read his answer in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, we need to move on. We're having great stories.
I'm going to mute Eileen in the meantime.
Okay. you're going to handle her by co-host, and Marion's going to move on. And I'm going to have 2 screen shares. I'm going to put the first one on right away, which is my title. Let's see. Okay, so I have to learn it. So let's see. Okay, tell me if the title comes in. Is it on now? Oh,
Yes.
okay. Okay, Amy Minnie. And see, it's in written form because that's what I'm going to submit it in a MUP. People have wondered for years, is there a Bigfoot, a Loch Ness monster? Well, in 1934, the people of Contra Costa County asked, is there a gigantic snake slithering nearby? The Fleischacker Zoo wanted to capture it for their menagerie. The Fujidi's farm children would no longer walk to school, and the women no longer stroll downtown. It all started on July 25th, 1934, when Anthony Romano burst breathless into the Antioch News office. I just came down from the old coal mines where I saw this gigantic snake slithering across the road. Then a man walking along Santa Fe Railroad tracks at Pittsburgh reported seeing a giant python. And 2 weeks later, 3 men fishing out at Old River saw it too. We were startled by that gigantic snake near our boat in the river. The monster would swim, then submerge and come to the surface, and it swam away toward the river bank. Fear was launched in the local folk. Middle August, Mr. Fujidi, a Japanese farmer in Knightston on the Hotchkiss Ranch, reported, my own eyes saw a 25-foot reptile with black and yellow spots. I went for a shotgun and help, but when we returned, we only found the trail of the tules mashed down leading to the river at Jersey Ferry. With great concern, Anthony Romano wrote a letter to George Pistani, superintendent of the San Francisco Fleischacker Zoo, who pondered the letter, then called Romano on the phone. Well, don't you remember that 14 years ago, the traveling circus's 30-foot python escaped when leaving Antioch? It is possible that it made its way up to the old coal mines and has been living up there in an abandoned shaft, eating rats, jackrabbits, and what's that? Is it unstable? I'm going to go on.
Why is not happening?
It's fine. I can hear it. It's fine.
Where are we?
Okay, that's Eileen. It sounds like Eileen's talk. Who knows what else would satisfy that snake? Wasn't the name Amy? Asked Bastani. Yeah, I was a kid then, said Romano, but my family called her Minnie. So after that, the citizens called the creature Amy Minnie. As more sightings were made, reporters from San Francisco and Reno arrived looking for primary witnesses, but none could be found. Only that person had heard the story. In September, before the Board of Supervisors, a Mr. Lorenzetti ran into that meeting. I just saw a 30-foot long snake near the Hotchkiss Ranch with teeth, foot-long fangs, and a multicolored body. That could kill my children. Something must be done. The supervisors discussed forming an official snake district, but instead referred the matter to the district attorney. News reporters were all over Mr. Lorenzetti that week, but to them, he reported, no, it was not me who saw Amy Minnie. It was the Japanese farm workers. Well, by October, George Bastani of the Fleischacker Zoo, he had received so many reports from all over Central California. He wanted to investigate or capture if she existed. He declared it could not be native only surmising that it was the snake from the circus. With 2 men, he came out, investigated the Hotchkiss Ranch, the coal mines, and tried to talk to all who saw her. But too many people had trampled the fields for clues, and only 2 people admitted to actually seeing her. Then by late October and early November was a smattering of more sightings of Amy Minnie by upstanding citizens. At dusk, their night lights revealed a gigantic snake lying partially coiled up on the road, slithering toward the bushes. But by the time they turned around, it was gone. I'm stopping screen sharing for a moment. Enough, enough, declared Dean Marvin, who was head of the Antioch Chamber of Commerce. And he was so fed up with all of those Amy Minnie reports, he devised a plan. Folks, this is the plan. Number 1, all sightings were to be reported to me, and you are to notify, I will notify the big game hunter, Jay Blowers, and he's going to stay nearby and on call. Number 2, Fire Chief Stan is going to blow the fire siren a minute apart in 3 short blasts. Number 3, 25 volunteers we're assembling. They're going to come to the city hall and then go up to this capture site wherever it is. Number 4, no guns are allowed.
Okay, guys, audio. No.
Now the volunteers were to be cautious because that reptile, it might crush its attackers or lash out. And only Blowers, he would be the only one allowed to carry, it would be a gas gun because he was counting on capturing it alive because it was worth $300 if alive, but only $50 if dead, because then you'd only have the screen, the skin of it. So the citizens waited, and on November 13th, when the special fire siren whistle was heard, citizens knew that the plan was in motion. They drove their tractors, trucks, and cars clogging the narrow road to the coal mines, but Police Chief Leroy held them back some 200 feet. This is for your own good, he said. The citizens peered through the dim evening light. Finally, they saw flashlights and a long creature being captured. They saw it being captured into a large box on the back of a truck. They were disappointed when that truck drove out the other end of the road. They heard it was Amy Minnie, but she'd been injured during the capture between the wrestling and the gas gun and needed to be looked after for a few days before being available for any public viewing. Saturday night, the citizens were invited to come down to the dance hall at Veterans Hall, where they could also see Amy Minnie for 50 cents. They were paraded into the side room where there were 2 snakes in a cage. The first one was a 26-foot cloth tube stuffed with sawdust, having electrically lit eyes. Screen share. The second one, is it there?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The second one was this, considerably more imposing at 32 foot, a rubber reptile, painted with such realistic markings that some visitors left the building still believing they'd actually seen a live snake. You see, in October, these men wanted to create and then expose a hoax so it would end all the stories. A.J. Johnson, he's on the far left. He owned the Antioch Tire and Electric Shop. He offered truck inner tubes for this second snake. It was they who pumped Amy Minnie with air, laid her across a dark road, wiggled her by ropes, and after the victim set up was passed by, the snake was quickly deflated, whisked away before they could even turn around. These known citizens, of course, the set up ones, of course, they went off to report Amy Minnie's sighting to the newspaper, and that story by now had made it to New York. We'll never know what was seen in the grasses in July, August, and September. But when Amy Minnie was revealed on November 17th, 1934, the fictional folly laid the city's fears to rest. Although the zoo had no new reptiles, the women and children were now safe. And her story lives on today, as you have heard. Amy Minnie, the great Antioch snake. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Nice story.
You're welcome. All right, from there, Miss Jean Ellison is next for telling. Let's get her opened up here. She's muted.
Self.
There you go. Hi, Jean.
Hi, everybody.
So she's going to talk about an experience in war-torn Northern Ireland in 1976.
Okay, I have a
really going back
here.
600 years, but she'll tell us about that. Okay.
You ready for some time travel?
Oh yeah, we've been traveling all over. Years goes way back.
It was 1976. My husband and I, Raleigh, my husband who's over here, hello Raleigh, went to Northern Ireland. He was selected and awarded a Fulbright Teacher Exchange Fellowship to Londonderry, Northern Ireland. He was the first exchange teacher there in 7 years because of the sectarian violence. We were going to exchange our houses, our cars, our guitars, our friends, our family. It was truly an exchange experience. We met them in Washington, D.C., where there was a conference before we headed out to the United Kingdom. After meeting them briefly, we realized that they were going to have a whole lot of fun in California. And they gave us some tips on how to be well in a war-torn area. We got on a plane and we landed after hours, it seemed, in Ireland. We had to stop in Ireland to refuel before we went to London to get on a plane to Belfast to get picked up by Tom McCulley's brother John for a 2-hour drive back to what was going to be our home for the year in Derry. Now, Derry is what we came to call where we lived for that year. And in Gaelic, D-O-I-R-E, Dara, is oak. So it's named after the oak that used to live there. We were delayed in London before we could fly to Belfast. And our friend who was going to pick us up, John McCulley, turned out to be our very best friend. He said, oh, I guess the Yanks changed their minds. They're not coming. So he went back to Derry. 2 hours each way. Well, our plane, we got another plane because we'd missed our flight, and we finally landed in Belfast. And there we got a hint of what was later to come in our experience of being searched, of having armed police, army, jeeps, lorries, Saracens, everywhere, everyone with guns. So we arrived at the airport and John wasn't there, of course, because he thought we'd given up and we'd gone home. We managed to call Derry and say, we're here, can you come get us? So he drove another 2 hours to come get us, and he was thinking, I don't think I'm gonna like these Yanks much. but he turned out to be our very dearest friend. It was very late at night when we arrived at our home for the year on the banks of the River Foyle. Now, the River Foyle separates the peoples in that area, the Protestants on one side of the river and the Catholics on the other side of the river. We were going to live on the Catholic side of the river, so we always called it Derry. Before we left, my mom asked me, Jean, do you think it's going to be okay living in a Catholic community and not being married? Because at that time, I was Jean Kennedy. So Jean Kennedy and Raleigh Ellison landed into Kingsfort Crescent in Derry in Northern Ireland. It was late when we got there. The family was there to welcome us. Of course, we'd missed the Irish stew they'd prepared for us had we been on time. And we were exhausted, totally wiped out. About 10:30 at night, there was an explosion. Kaboom! My eyes got big, just like they just did. And I said, whoa, what was that? And John McCulley, in his Irish humor, said, "Okay, it was just a wee welcome for the Yanks." Oh, thank you very much. In the morning, we could see the River Foyle was right in our backyard, and we could look down the river and see the city center. It looked nice. It was beautiful. The house was lovely. The neighbors were nice. The family was fabulous. And we'd been there a little while when we heard that there was going to be a peace march organized by two amazing women, one Catholic and one Protestant, Myreed Corrigan and Betty Williams. And they had organized these marches all over Northern Ireland. But this was going to be in our backyard on the Craigavon Bridge, the bridge that was the only connection between the Protestants and the Catholics. Well, we decided that, we got to go. We didn't come halfway around the world to miss this. This is going to be historic. And our friends, our neighbors, the family that we had just met were like saying goodbye to us forever. They said, "Don't go down the town. There'll be murder down the town." Well, we didn't heed their advice. It was only a 20-minute walk to downtown. So we got on our walking shoes and started out. People are waving goodbye to us. We walked downtown, the Jeeps, the Saracens, the armored vehicles, the armed soldiers, the police with rifles, the helicopters going everywhere, and we were being checked at checkpoints 2-3 times, and we looked up on a billboard and it said, 7 years, don't make it 8, which referred to the amount of time that had passed since everything had erupted and turned into the Troubles. But to understand the Troubles for real, you have to go back in history about 600 years. As we approached the bridge, we were past the bombed out buildings, the stores that were still open in downtown. There weren't many people gathered. We thought, oh, there's nobody coming here. But soon people came out of the woodworks. The Catholics came. We got onto the bridge. We started walking towards the center of the bridge. And we could see on the other side the Protestants. They were coming from the other side. And without knowing it, we ended up right in the middle of the bridge. Well, I have to admit, thinking that if the warring factions wanted to make a real splash out of this, they'd blow this bridge and get 2 Yanks to boot. But that went away as the 2 sides came together and hugged, embraced, sang songs, prayers. It was an amazing experience, one that we would never have missed for the world. There was beauty that day. Tears are streaming down my face. And you know, Leon Uris had it right when he quoted a Yeats poem when he titled his book, Ireland, the Terrible Beauty. Because there was beauty that day, but there was also terrible. Those two women who were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1976 suffered terrible. Their family, their neighbors, their friends. There was threats, there were murders, it was awful. But we were there to pay witness to a really positive step toward peace among the people. So Raleigh had his teaching job at St. Peter's Christian Brothers School in the Cregan. Now the Cregan, we called it the cowboy country because that was an IRA stronghold. And many of his students, though very young, were soldiers in the IRA. So we had a very emotional experience. And whenever I think about it, whenever I just tell this story anecdotally, it's just like it happened yesterday, but that was 44 years ago? Ah! That's my story of living in a war zone. Now, I told you, I wasn't married. We weren't married when I went, but we got married there. But that's another story for another time. Thank you. And thank you, Marion, and Shags and Ed for putting this together.
You're welcome.
Nicely done, Jean. Nicely done.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Thank you, everybody. I enjoyed the stories. I have to go.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, next time.
And people who do leave, another way to do it is you can go into chat and say, gotta go. So that's fine too. Let me put it on gallery. Okay, I've got you all on gallery. Any hands raised that want to say something at this minute? Eileen, okay, I've unmuted Eileen.
Okay. Okay.
All right.
We can't hear you and we haven't been able to see you, so apologies. Had to go in on my cell phone out of the other. Has this been recorded?
Yes. So I'll send you.
We missed a lot of the last
recording. Okay.
Yeah, because it kept stopping. Every minute or so it would stop, and we missed a whole slew of what you were saying.
It was smooth for me, so perhaps on the recording it'll be fine. We have one more.
I hope so.
Okay.
Thank you.
We have Sarah Lord is going to share. Okay, and she's going to read a poem of her own doing, and it relates to the history of women. Sarah Lord.
A couple of years ago, I participated in an art show, and I exhibited 2 visual art pieces and this poem. And the theme of the show was strong women. One day, a long time ago, a woman woke up under a tree. It was raining. She searched for a dry place for her family to live. She spied a cave. One day, a long time ago, a woman woke up. She was in a shack. The wind blew through the cracks. She made mud to fill the open spaces. One day in the 4th century BC, agnosticy woke up and saw that women needed help delivering their children. She became a doctor and a gynecologist. She had to wear men's clothes when she went to work. One day, a long, long time ago, a Native American storyteller woke up in Oklahoma. She felt spiritually bereft. For 4 years, she followed the scent of her river home. She and the river again told stories and passed them on to the young ones. One day, a long, long time ago, 2 women woke up. They saw sick and wounded soldiers. Clara Barton started the Red Cross. Florence Nightingale created a nursing corps to help the wounded and dying men. One day, not so long ago, a woman woke up. She didn't want to iron clothes anymore. Ruth Benarito perfected permanent press wrinkle-free fabric. Yes. One day, not so long ago, a woman woke up. She was distressed about the lack of care given to our planet. Rachel Carson established the modern ecology movement. One day, a while ago, a young girl was raped. Fear kept her words stuffed inside. When Maya Angelou finally spoke, words for all women rushed from her heart. One day, a while ago, 2 women woke up. Georgia O'Keeffe and Freda Kahlo brazenly chose to paint in their own way, thus freeing the artist inside many women. One day, a month ago, 102 women woke up. They are now congresswomen in the U.S. House of Representatives. 25 other women woke up. They are senators in the U.S. Senate. They are not dreaming. Tomorrow, millions of women will wake up. I wonder what they will do.
Wonderful. Nicely done, Sarah. Very cool. Very cool.
Thank you.
Shags, how do we unmute? Oh, I see it. Unmute all. We'll.
Thank you so much for that story.
Oh, they're still.
And then everybody else can mute. They have to unmute themselves.
Okay. So we've unmuted who we can. So now you have to unmute yourselves. And there's a lot of you. Okay. So just work on unmuting, but we appreciate having all of our storytellers today. So thank you to Ed, Angela James, Shags, Marion, Jean, and Sarah Lord. This has been a fantastic historical afternoon. For the Delta Wordweavers, our next meeting is on July 12th. Yes, a Sunday afternoon. And the theme is about children's stories. Those of you who know some children who are ready to tell a story, I want you, like in the next 1 or 2 weeks, to refer that person specifically to me so I can talk with them on the phone and get them set up to have an audience for their stories. So please send children to me who have stories to tell. And I'm going to try and get some. And we will fill out with adults, and Ed Lewis has said that he's going to tell Lizard Song. That's a fun story. So did anybody else want to raise their hand that they have so we hope to have children. It's going to be family friendly, obviously. Time to tell some stories to all ages. Anybody raise their hand? So I'll tell one. So for July, we've got Ed and Marion, and hopefully some children. Not hopefully, I'm going to. Okay, Sarah Lord. Yes, Sarah and I have been with children telling stories. And there's John. I saw John. I'll connect with you during the month here. Okay, great. We just need that help there. All right. Okay. Any last comments? Boy, this has been fabulous, and we traveled all over today. Thank you so much. So we're gonna sign off. Thanks for coming to the Wordweavers. Bye.